Today we're going to be doing lesson 8-15 where we basically compare the quadratic formula, completing the square, and factoring. So we're going to be using three different examples, looking at three different examples and solving them in three different ways. For the first example, we're going to use quadratic formula. For the second, we're going to use completing the square. And for the third, we're going to use factoring. Each process is different, but each process will give you the exact same answer. So I can do completing the square or quadratic formula, and I'll get the exact same answer every single time, and I can then do factoring. But note, you can't always factor. So let's do our first example where we want to use the quadratic formula. The first thing we do is we identify our a value, b value, and our c value. So in this example, a is attached to my x squared, which is a 1. B is attached to my x, which is a positive 6. And then c is hanging out by itself, and it is a negative 7. We now go to the side and we find our negative b, our b squared minus 4ac, and our 2a. So the first thing I'm going to do is find my negative b, which is just going to be the negative of a 6, which is just negative 6. I'm then going to do my b squared minus 4ac, which is going to be 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 7, because that's my a and my c. We type that into our calculator exactly as it's written, and you should tell me what you're going to get. I get 64. And then last but not least, we do our 2a, which is going to be 2 times 1, which is 2. So I now just substitute these values into the quadratic formula. We learned yesterday that our quadratic formula was x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Let me just erase that. So I now know my value. So I have x equals, my negative b was a negative 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, which was just 64, all over 2, because 2a was 2. I go to the side and I figure out what radical 64 is. 8 and 8, 2 and 4, 2 and 2, 2 and 4, 2 and 2. All my 2's go under a radical. So I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 2's. Double on the inside, single on the outside, double, double. I have 3 doubles, so 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So that is what's going to go in for my radical. So I get x equals negative 6 plus or minus 8 over 2. We now split it up into negative 6 plus 8 over 2 and negative 6 minus 8 over 2. Just type it into your calculator. Negative 6 plus 8 divided by 2 is 1. Negative 6 minus 8 divided by 2 is negative 7. Those are your two x values. So this equation has two solutions, and they are x equals 1 and x equals negative 7. Perfect. Now let's go on to our next example where we complete the square. Again, there are a whole video on quadratic formula and a whole video on completing the square. So with the completing the square, the first thing we do is we get all of our x's on one side. We have x squared minus 8x So we have to get rid of this 15. So to get rid of the positive 15, we subtract 15 from both sides. My 15s cancel. So I get x squared minus 8x plus a square equals negative 15 plus a square. And if you remember in that video, we just draw our diamond. Negative 8. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. So I have negative 4, negative 4. And then what's negative 4 times negative 4? 16. So I put a 16 in both squares. So to factor this side, I just look right here. And I have x minus 4, x minus 4 equals negative 15 plus 16, which is just 1. This becomes x minus 4 squared equals 1. And now we can solve this equation. Take the square root of both sides, take the square root, and I get x minus 4 equals plus or minus radical 1. Well, you know that the square root of 1 is 1 because 1 times 1 is 1, so I really just have x minus 4 equals plus or minus 1. To get rid of a minus 4, I add 4 to both sides, so I add 4, and I get x equals 4 plus or minus 1. We break it apart. 4 plus 1 is 5. 4 minus 1 is 3. I have two solutions, or two roots, or two x-intercepts, or two x values, and they are 5 and 3. And that's how you complete the square. We're now going to go into our final example where we factor. And factoring we learned a few months ago before remote learning started. So we have x squared minus 5x plus 6. We want to find out what adds up to a negative 5 and multiplies to a 6. So I draw my diamond. I put my 6 up top because that's what I want to multiply to. And I put my negative 5 downstairs because that's what I want to add to. I go to the side, I write down everything that multiplies to a 6, so I have 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. That's it. Thing is, I want to add up to a negative number. So to add up to a negative number, I got to have at least one of my numbers be negative. But here's the issue. I know that when I multiply, two negatives have to make a positive. So I'm going to try out this negative 1 and negative 6. So I'm going to put a negative 1 and a negative 6 in here. Negative 1 times negative 6 is a 6, that works. But negative 1 plus negative 6 is not negative 5, it's negative 7. So it cannot be my 1 and my 6. Do some erasing, do some erasing. So now I got to try my 2 and my 3. 2 times 3 is 6, but 2 plus 3 is not negative 5, it's positive 5, which means that they both have to be negative. So I have really negative 2 times negative 3, positive 6, check. Negative 2 plus negative 3, negative 5, check. I now factor and write it as x minus 2, x minus 3 equals 0. And you know it's time to grab a cup of tea and do some tea time. So I set my factors equal to 0 for tea time. Only way to get rid of a minus 2 is to add 2. So add 2 to both sides, and I get x equals 2. Add 3 to both sides, so I add 3, and I get x equals 3, and that's your final answer. So that is how you factor. How to solve quadratics using factoring. So that's your lesson for today. Make sure that you write down one noticing or one question that you have. Make sure that you work on your independent practice. It's a delta math. You just have 3 questions to do. And it's basically like, oh, do as many as you can to get them right. So it's just being graded on completion. So as long as you have 3 questions done correctly, you'll get full credit for the assignment. Make sure that you are submitting work. If you're not submitting work, you will not be given credit for the assignment. If you have any questions, email myself or Miss Townsend. Have a great, great day.